Almost.
Oh yeah.
There you go.
There we go. You can see what happens here when they've been sitting a long time. The ring has seized into its groove. The oil ring is kind of still loose, but you can see the two compression rings, they're tight down inside the piston groove. So again, I wasn't going to use these, but actually I can see on the top here, with this one, the number, and see if it's a looks like 21963, and it looks like it's a stock size. It says 21963, then space P4, space Z, Z16. I think if it was oversized, it'd have a 020, 040, whatever stamped in there as well. Like I say, I don't think this engine's ever been opened up before. I'm pretty sure this is everything's standard inside. And it probably wouldn't be this way if the guy put the spark plug back in when he set this out.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You think? What do you think, fella? But like I say, these pistons are probably no good. I would never use them again anyway. But the rods, look at this bearing. The bearing doesn't look horrible. It's better than number 3. This is number 2, the seized one. So I'd be happy with that. Okay, let's get the other 2 out. Let's see. Just keep it from here, I think. Okay. You know, I think I'm going to hone those 2 cylinders out just so the piston will come out a little easier.
Okay.
Only take a second, and I'm already hooked up for it. Carbon will form at this outer edge, and I can still feel a little bit right there, but again, we're not reusing the pistons, it'll just make it easier to slide them out with that removed. I marked the rods prior. I don't know if you can zoom in and see what I've done there, but I marked each one just a little tiny dimple with the center punch, just so that I know how it all goes back together. You can't mix these up. If you do, when you go to put it all back together, not on the right one, they won't be forming a perfect circle. They'll be off either way. And when you try to tighten them down, it'll lock the crankshaft up, and the crankshaft won't turn.
Okay.
Okay, there's the bearing. Feels very smooth. Kind out of the way I want. Let's take a look and make sure these are actually standard bearings. That's a good thing to check. It'll be stamped on the back if they're anything but standard. And these say standard STD. Right down there at the bottom.
Okay.
So again, I just don't think this engine's ever going to open up.
Now, if they were not standard, what would be stamped on there?
It would
Just
have like a 020,
the
030, 004.
the amount that are oversized or undersized?
Right.
Yeah.
That means that they will have cut the crankshaft, made it smaller. They have to make these bigger
Okay.
to take up that.
Got it.
Another one. A little wear on the side. It is, but it's, gosh, it feels very smooth. It doesn't feel like that oil pump felt like the surface of an old record.
Uh-huh.
That's,
Now, what are those main bearings made out of? What material is that?
they used to be made out of a steel backing with 2 or 3 layers that have copper, lead, indium, things like that, and the outer layer, the layer that I'm touching right here, used to be a very soft metal. It almost felt like lead, and the object of it was when a piece of trash came into the oil passage into here, it would embed itself inside the what they call white metal, which is the lead compound.
So it's much like a Babbitt bearing then?
Yes, yes. I mean, the original ones that came on earlier cars than this, that's what they were. They were basically insertable Babbitt bearings.
Okay, yeah.
Whereas in the old days with the Model T, this had to be poured. This metal was poured into here. They put it in a little mold, and they poured hot liquid metal in there, and then they broke it apart, and then they machined it to the size. These, like all modern stuff, it's all pre-machined. Everything's done to size. If your machinist grinds the crankshaft correctly, everything should bolt together. You're just double checking what they do. Here's the #1 upper, and you can see it's pretty good condition. These just may be old and need replacement. I mean, they're going to be replaced, but it feels good. Can't complain about that. #4 here, not the same. A little dark patch on it, but as you run your finger across it, you don't feel anything. If the dark patch wasn't there, you'd think this is a very good bearing. But again, we're all going with all new ones. So. Okay. If you look at this one compared to the #2, the rings here are all free. That's the way they should be when they came out. You get a little bit of carbon forms at the top here.
Right.
Because as the piston moves up and down, compression actually comes down this far. So when you're burning the fuel, it'll leave carbon all the way around here. It should stop at that top ring, but you're going to get a little bit. The bottom one is an oil control ring. It prevents oil from coming up and going into the cylinder. Say if somebody really was desperate for a set of pistons, they could probably use these and get some high miles on them, but I'm going to use the rods. So. you see, pistons, the rings are loose. Doesn't look bad. You're always going to have some carbon up here. It's almost impossible to prevent. Doesn't look horrible. Again, pistons are going to be thrown out. All right, let's look at the crankshaft. This crankshaft has the roll radius fillets here on the sides. This is one of the later A+ type. I don't know good or bad about them. I've never, gosh, I think the one on my last Mini had a Cooper S nitride crank, and I never had. All I did with that is every 30, 40, 50,000 miles, I pulled it out.
All right, we're live.
Okay. Today on the Mini 1275 motor, we're going to install the crankshaft and the pistons and rods. I'm not going to do the cam because I may be using the cam that's already in the car, and so I've got a brand new Mini Spares Evolution 002 cam ready to go if it turns out that the other one's bad. It's a Swift-Tune SW5 in the car, and it's a pretty nice cam, but I'm worried that it may have damage from some of those bad lifters, or from some of the lifters that are in there, and so I'm prepared either way. If I don't use this one, a friend of mine is going to buy it from me, so I'm not out anything. Okay, so
John, just reiterate what we did last on part 1 of this video, as far as what the machine shop did for you.
okay.
As far as reconditioning the cylinders and that sort of thing.
The machine shop, I took the block over because this engine had stood out in the weather with one of the spark plugs removed, and it would have taken the guy 10 seconds to screw in a spark plug part way, but he didn't do it. So water, he left it outside instead of putting a cover over it. Water went into the number 2 spark plug hole down in the cylinder and started corroding. It wasn't the worst I've ever seen. The piston broke free pretty easy, but it had pitted into the cylinder enough to where they had it cleaned up probably 95% at 20. And when he did that and told me bored it out to 20, they used to call it hot tank, but now they got some kind of a giant dishwasher they put them in to clean all the grease and stuff off. He did that. He bored the cylinders and he honed them. And he also, I've got a box down here with the new pistons. He pressed the pistons. The piston pins are press fit, and he pressed the new pistons on for me. So that's what the machine shop did.
Also, tell us about your crankshaft. Did they have to regrind the crankshaft, or?
Good question. The crankshaft looked pretty good when we took it out, if you remember from the first video. And I took it down there and they looked at it and he polished it up and it stayed standard. Okay. So I had to wait to find that out too before I could order new bearings. All the parts I buy come from Mini Spares in London. They're the best and about the quickest, even to America, and they're the least expensive overall. So I've got the brand new bearings. These are brand new main bearings here. And actually, I dropped one. There it is. I'll wipe these down with a clean cloth and insert them on the A+ motor. The grooved ones go in the upper half, but you can only really do it one way because it has a tang. It has an offset tang on these, and that'll go on the upper. But the lower ones, which are plain, the tang is in the center, and that will go in the caps. And you see the cap there has a tang in the center. They changed that for the A+ motor. So, take this down with my clean rag. I got the engine assembly lube. I had to send to England for Made in America assembly lube. But must be good stuff.
And I'm just going to pan around the engine because I think the last time our audience saw the engine, it was in dire straits as far as appearance was concerned.
Yes.
Now John has already gone and cleaned it off, and he's repainted it with some blue engine paint, so it looks almost like it's brand new from the factory.
I used Ford, I think Ford engine blue or something like that. Just high temp paint, engine enamel I bought down at the, I think, AutoZone.
And I'm going to show our audience your little box of goodies here
Oh, wow.
with all your new parts.
Okay.
And that includes the pistons that you just
Yeah,
purchased.
those are brand new pistons already pressed on the rods, and the rings got to be put back on. I took the rings off before I took it down because pressing the rings on, or the rods on, can be kind of a violent procedure, and I didn't want to risk damaging a ring, which would have meant another week to 2 weeks to get a new ring. So, okay, I'm going to put just a drop of lubricant on these bearings. Just, I don't want to set the crankshaft down in here dry. So, just, I'll put more in a minute, but for the initial sizing here, I'm just going to put just a slight smear, just so it doesn't go metal to metal. Okay, and I'm going to use Plastigauge here after I put the crankshaft in to test the clearances.
Okay, and kind of explain that procedure like you told me just a
All
few
right,
minutes
well,
ago.
Plastigauge is a very thin, it's almost like a piece of clay, and actually let me see if I can. Okay, that's what it looks like right there.
Okay.
That's Plastigauge. I'll take a small strip of that, and you'll see in a minute, I'll lay it down on the journal, put the cap on, torque the cap down to spec, don't move anything because you'll smear this, and then you remove the cap straight away. You torque it down and then remove it, and then when you do, this will have hopefully been crushed, and you use this to measure the width, and it'll tell you 1, 1.5, 2, or 3 thousandths the clearance you have in the bearing. If it's not right, that means either the bearings are bad or the crankshaft has not been ground correctly. And since this is standard and these are standard bearings, I don't anticipate a problem, but we check it anyway.
Okay.
I've marked all these from when I took it apart, but in fact the mains only go one way. The only one you could possibly mix up would be the middle one, and as long as you did the tangs always go together. Whichever one you take apart, the tangs always go on the same side, so that makes it easy. And really the only thing you can mix up on these would be the rod bearings, because they all look to be the same, and it would take a special tool to get in there and measure one if you mixed them up. But you'll find if you do mix them up, it can make the crankshaft impossible to turn. So if you assemble as you go, you turn the crankshaft each time. Every time you torque down a cap or a bearing, always turn the crank and make sure it turns the full circle. I know this is the center main. It's got the grooves here machined on the side for the thrust washers. It's got that for the tank. Here's the old ones. They'll fit in here like that. And you can see I've cleaned these up. But one side, the side that takes the thrust, will be worn and shiny. The opposite side will be dull. And you can see how these wear like that. When you push on the clutch, the spring of the clutch forces the crankshaft this way. So I can tell from that these went on this side because they have the wear from the crankshaft. Whereas these, there's rarely any force pulling it this way, so these rarely get any wear to them. I save them only because it's possible down the road that you go to fit one of these and the thrust is wrong one way or another. And sometimes you can take one of these good ones and use it, match it up with one you have to kind of get it right. All right, right now I'm going to get my crankshaft and lay the crankshaft. Thrust washers. 2 with the tang go on the cap. The 2 without go under. You have. This is a point that you got to be very careful when you go to assemble. This side here, with the groove in it, is soft, and it's meant to go. It's the wear surface, and this is what'll wear down. And you can see it's copper. This side is hard steel. That's the backing. If you put this in the wrong way, you'll have steel on steel, and it'll wear these out in no time at all. But if you put it in with the groove, it should fit outward. So bump this a little bit one way. We can put this in, make sure the groove is going out. Pop that in there like that. Tap the crank back. Put the other one in. Again, you want the groove to the outside. I haven't tried these before, so I don't know. There it is. Fit. Okay.
I'm going to get a close-up on one of these. When you talk about the groove, you're talking about...
I'm talking about this groove right here.
One second.
That groove there. Because if you notice, one side is flat.
Right.
And this is steel. It's either copper, it's what it looks like, or some kind of a copper alloy. Mm-hmm. This is soft, so you're not steel on steel. Okay. I've got those in there. Now I'm going to take plastic gauge. Take just a little piece, about the width, and you lay it right on the top like that. See if I can get it straight across. It's not really critical, but you see, it's pretty close to being straight. You get the correct cap. That's the correct cap. I put the 2 thrust washers, the bottom thrust washers on, or actually the top, because I didn't want the crank to slide back and forth. But this isn't final fitting, so I'm not going to put the other 2 in. This will hold it enough for me to torque it down. Tangs both to the same side. Plus, I marked this when I took it apart, and I see There's 2 dimples there, and there's 2 dimples right there. So that matches tang to tang, so this should go on right here. Okay? Should feel it go in those 2 dowels. Now you can't turn the crankshaft at all here. And actually, let me get a drop of oil. You're supposed to oil those. No, actually I'm not going to oil.
You talking about the threads?
Yeah, I'm going to use I think red Loctite later.
Okay. But this is just a test with
This
the.
is just a test fit,
Okay.
just to make sure the clearances are good.
And so you're torquing them down to the specified
Right.
torque.
I have 85 Newton meters
Okay.
according to the book. Now you got to be careful not to turn the crankshaft. That's why it's kind of awkward to do.
Because it would smear the clay inside,
Exactly.
right?
It would smear the plastic gauge.
Right.
And once you've plastic gauged it, you only do that once, and assuming it's okay, then you remove the plastic gauge. I usually use a razor blade to scrape it off, and then you can spin it any way you want.
Now, do you use the plastic gauge on each one of them individually, or all
If
of them?
I'm suspicious, I'll use it on all of them.
Okay.
But with this one, I really, this was a engine that had never been messed with before.
Right.
From the factory, it had never been split apart. So I'm reasonably sure that everything is in pretty good shape. If you remember from first part, the only reason the engine was bad was that gear in the transmission came apart. The bearing, rather.
Right.
And that's not good. But the engine was not that bad. Let's see if we can. Today it's kind of awkward. So let's try it this way. Not easy to do. Without twisting the crankshaft. Yeah, that's got to figure out some way else to do here. Maybe I should have done number 1. It's tight. We're getting there. There we are. Okay. Let's see. Careful with your hand there. Okay. Now we gotta remove it. Oh, you want to hold the back, please? Yeah, push towards me. There we go. Okay. Okay. You can look down there and you can see plastic gauge has deformed. I come in here and I have 2000s. You can look on there and see
Okay.
if it was 3000s, you can see it's, and if it's 1.5, it's, yeah, it's not, if it's almost exactly 2000s. Now I can go to my book here and double check what the clearance is.